Nice tattoo, ma'am. Big fan of the SEALs, Petty Officer Lang spoke loudly, hand raised to block the entrance gate of the base. His voice carried a sharp hint of contempt. Ava Brooks stopped right in front of him, lifting her ID card with a calmness so firm it felt unsettling. Lang glanced at the card for barely a second, before letting out a short laugh. Torres stepped out from the guard booth, chewing gum, and rolling his eyes at the trident tattoo peeking from under Ava's sleeve. Looks real, but that's for people who actually earned it, Torres said. Let me guess you like the SEALs, so you got it for fun. A group of nearby sailors slowed their steps, turning to see what was happening. No one said a word, but their curiosity only fueled Lang's arrogance. You think flashing that tattoo gets you onto this base? Lang raised his voice. Wannabes should pick another direction. Ava didn't answer. She simply held her ID card steady in the air, like a quiet but unshakable reminder of what needed to be done. Lang crossed his arms, smirking. If that's a fake ID, don't bother. I've seen plenty like you. Ava looked straight into his eyes. Scan the card. Lang's smile faded just a little, then returned sharper than before. You really want to get kicked out of here? Pretty bold for a fake vet. Torres chuckled. A few onlookers shook their heads, amazed that anyone would dare walk around showing off a trident tattoo. Not far away, a low, strong voice called out. Ava Brooks, Master Chief Rourke, who had served 3 decades, rose to his feet, his expression tightening instantly. He pulled out his phone and dialed quickly. Commander Holt, sir, she's at the gate. The moment those words left his mouth, Rourke's face grew solemn. He understood that the mockery happening at the gate had just crossed a dangerous line one the 2 young guards had no idea existed. If you believe that true courage doesn't come from the sound of gunfire, but from the silence carried by those who survived war, then subscribe to Veterans Legacy Stories to help us preserve the memories, the dignity, and the honor owed to our quiet heroes. Ava Brooks remained where she stood after the jeers were thrown at her. No reaction, no flinch, no explanation, only silence. A silence with enough weight to make the nearby laughter suddenly feel out of place. She stood with her back straight, her right hand tightening around her ID card until her knuckles turned pale. Her breathing was steady, slow, deep. No one could guess what she was thinking, but that stillness alone was enough to quiet a few people in the crowd. Ava's eyes were fixed toward the open space ahead, though she wasn't really looking at anything. It was the gaze of someone who had learned to face extreme pressure without letting it break her. Eyes that had looked through smoke, through walls of dirt, about to be blown apart, through moments where one mistake meant the end of a life. Outside, the ocean wind kept blowing, carrying the smell of salt and damp wood from the distant piers. The footsteps of Marines jogging past echoed in quick, firm rhythms, like the thin drum beats of a bass waking up for the day. But inside Ava, those sounds faded, giving way to another, the sound of memory. It wasn't clear, just a distant echo, steady hands, Brooks. That voice had followed her through countless nights in the Afghan desert. The voice of a teammate who always stood behind her whenever she had to kneel before a device designed to kill. Just one short sentence, yet always enough to steady her when the ticking hands of life and death were pointed straight at her. In that moment, Ava was no longer at the base gate. In her mind, she was standing in a field of choking dust, sunlight beating down like fire. Grit clung to her gloves, layering thicker with every breath. A command pack heavy with sweat and gunpowder lay beside the shallow pit where the IED had been hidden. The radio crackled. A helicopter thumped somewhere far off. Eyes waited behind her. And the pressure forced her to do what no one ever wished to do, lean forward, and touch something that could end everything with a single wrong breath. Ava blinked. The battlefield slid back. She returned to the pavement beneath her boots, the small pebbles mixed with dust, the ocean wind brushing against her sleeve. But the residue of that memory remained in her breath, in the tension of her grip on the ID card, and a calm that only those who had survived war could truly recognize. No one spoke. Ava's silence spread outward like an invisible ring, making the earlier laughter turn forced and awkward. Torres stared at her a little longer than he meant to. His earlier smugness slipped, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Lang grew irritated, as if Ava's silence was stealing the control he believed he held. "Why are you just standing there?" Lang snapped, but his voice no longer carried the same certainty. Ava didn't answer. She stayed quiet. Not challenging. Not afraid. Not fragile. Just a stillness so resolute that it made the person facing her feel smaller without understanding why. Even the Marines jogging past slowed a step, casting quick glances before speeding up again, as though sensing something they shouldn't disturb. A stronger gust of wind swept through. Papers near the guard booth fluttered and fell. A strand of Ava's dark brown hair shifted against her forehead. But nothing else changed. No one knew that in this brief silence, she was holding herself back from sinking too deep into the harsh memory that had nearly swallowed her a moment ago. She had once worked in moments where a single wrong action meant the death of her entire team. Standing still in the face of insults was not the hardest thing she'd ever done. That silence began to alter the atmosphere. A few sailors in the crowd straightened their backs. One placed a hand on his belt as if expecting something. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. Something was wrong. Something was approaching. Something beyond the shallow understanding of the two young guards. Ava inhaled softly, exhaled slowly, still standing straight as if bearing the weight of the entire sky on her shoulders. And just as that silence reached its heaviest point, Lang made the worst choice he could, an action that opened the door to the humiliation that was about to unfold. Lang stepped closer, his eyes filled with challenge. He lifted his hand and tapped the tip of his finger against the trident tattoo on Ava's arm as if it were nothing more than a cheap knockoff. "You didn't earn this." The words fell sharp as a blade. The air around the gate tightened instantly. A few people in the crowd drew in quiet breaths. Some scoffed. Others looked away, trying to escape the discomfort spreading among them. Ava's silence, already heavy, was now ripped open by Lang's arrogant tone. Ava didn't react right away. Only her hand tightened around her ID card, the tendons along her wrist rising sharply. Her breath caught halfway, as though her body were bracing for something familiar, something the men in front of her would never understand. "You hear me?" Lang curled his lip. "People who earn this don't stand here pretending." Torres folded his arms. "I've seen a few like you. Serious face, tough posture, but always just wanting to play the hero." The words kept falling one after another, as if the two men were trying to crush Ava's stillness beneath them. Some eyes in the crowd shifted from curiosity to mockery. The humiliation was no longer subtle, it was open, raw, and thoughtless. And then the memory arrived. Not crashing in, not exploding. It came slowly, deep enough to drown everything around her. Ava saw herself kneeling on cracked earth, her gloves smeared with blood, her breath burning in her chest. The hot desert wind of Afghanistan whipped against her face. Torn sandbags, dirt carved into trenches from the force of a previous blast. The smell of gunpowder still gripping the air. In front of her was a line of wires from an IED exposed in the churned soil. Just to her right, a few meters away, lay the body of Ethan Brooks, his arm still draped halfway across his chest, as if he had been trying to shield his teammates one last time. His trident peeked from his torn sleeve, catching the light in a cold, solemn glint. Ava remembered calling his name, but no answer came. Only the broken signal of a radio mixed with gunfire. "Steady hands, Brooks. You're all they've got right now." She remembered every second of disarming the second bomb. Each motion of her hands trembling, yet unyielding. Each breath dragging itself painfully out of her lungs. The pressure weighing not just on her fingers, but on a heart that tore at the sight of the man she loved, lying still beside her. And finally, when she cut the firing wire and stabilized the device, she had felt something unmistakable, that this was the moment she chose to keep living, to carry the trident as a promise that Ethan's legacy would never be lost. The memory faded. The desert dust disappeared. And she was back at the Coronado Gate, the ocean wind, the pavement, the faces staring at her. Ava pulled her arm away from Lang's reach. A small movement, yet absolute. Her eyes changed, no longer the quiet calm from before. Now they held a resolve forged in places far harsher than this gate, something only those who had survived battlefields could recognize. Lang frowned. Being challenged made him more aggressive. "Fine," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "If you don't walk away, I'll call the MPs. Stolen valor isn't a small thing. Wearing a fake trident is a crime." Several people in the crowd lifted their heads at those words. Stolen valor. A charge so serious it could silence an entire room. No one imagined he had just hurled it at a person whose name they would soon never dare speak without respect. Torres let out a dry laugh. "You want to end up in cuffs too?" Ava simply looked at them. No fear, no retaliation, no pleading. Just an expression that made the knees of those standing behind Lang feel strangely weak. Her eyes said it all. She had faced things far more brutal than this careless accusation. Lang put his hand on the radio. "I'll count to 3. If you don't walk, I—" He didn't finish the sentence, because Ava stood exactly where she was, not moving an inch. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to threaten. Her silence was the strongest act of resistance in the entire scene. And just as Lang prepared to press the button to call the MPs, something else began to move, something that would push the situation far beyond his control. Master Chief Rourke stood several dozen meters from the gate, yet every word Lang spat out felt like it was striking him directly. He had witnessed chaos many times throughout his military life, but he had never seen such blatant disrespect aimed at someone to whom he owed both respect and battlefield memory. Rourke pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Commander Holt. What's going on?" Master Chief Holt's voice was steady and focused, the tone of a man buried under stacks of reports. Rourke looked straight toward Ava, still standing in the middle of the threats being thrown at her. "They're about to detain Master Chief Brooks." There was a brief silence on the other end. Not because Holt doubted him, but because he understood that name too well. Confirmed that Holt said, his voice dropping lower. "Did you just say Master Chief?" "Brooks, yes, sir," Rourke replied quietly. "Ava Brooks." Holt set his pen down. He ordered Ava's service number to be pulled up immediately. Within seconds, her record appeared. Name Ava Marie Brooks, highest rank, Master Chief, Petty Officer, EOD, years of service, 24 years, deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, Helmand Province, IEDs disarmed, over 200 awards, Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart, Special Command, commendations attached, Unit SEAL Team 3, EOD. Attachment, marital status, widow, Lieutenant CMDR Ethan Brooks, KIA. Holt read each line as if reading a fragment of history that only those who had lived through war could truly understand. Those accolades were not just numbers. Each line was a life saved. Each note was a day Ava had traded with her own breath. Holt closed the file. His face changed completely. Gone was the fatigue of long hours at work. Now there was only the tension of a man who realized that a grave mistake was unfolding under his command, a mistake that could not be allowed to continue for even another second. Master Chief Rourke Holt set his voice steady and heavy. "Hold your position. Don't let anyone move her." "Yes, sir." One beat later, Holt said a sentence rarely heard across the entire base. "Get the convoy, now!" No hesitation, no questions about why. Those under Holt's command understood that when he gave an order like that, something far beyond a simple gate incident was happening. And they also knew the name Ava Brooks was not one to be spoken lightly. Inside his office, Holt stood up. He straightened his collar and smoothed the area over his chest where his own trident rested. A few young officers glanced his way and instantly sensed the pressure thickening in the room. No one asked anything. No one dared stand in his way. Holt stepped out of his office and moved quickly down the stairs, each stride decisive. 2 aides hurried behind him, one carrying the file he had just reviewed, another rushing to notify the command master chief. As they moved, the rumble of engines from the front courtyard rose deep, sharp, full of authority. The convoy responded to Holt's order the way a body responds to reflex. A young officer met Holt at the door. "Sir, the vehicles are ready." "Move," Holt answered curtly. The line of black Suburbans began rolling forward. Each turn of the wheels carried the weight of a grim truth. A former Master Chief, someone who had once carried an entire SEAL team on her shoulders, had just been humiliated at the very gate of the base she had served her entire life. Inside the vehicle, Holt reopened the file. His eyes stopped at one photograph, Ava and Ethan standing side by side. 2 young faces smiling, their uniforms dusty from deployment. Behind them was an MRAP with holes torn through it. And Ethan's trident peeked from beneath his sleeve, the trident Ava now carried on her own skin, keeping the last promise she had made to her husband. Holt closed the file and stared straight ahead. He knew it would be only minutes before he arrived. And when he did, everything would change, not just for Ava, but for the young guards who had dared insult one of the most courageous women their force had ever known. And as the convoy drew closer to the gate, the quiet inside David Holt began to harden into a force Lang and Torres could never have imagined. The roar of engines echoed loudly as the line of black Suburbans approached the gate. Those standing around the guard booth turned instinctively. Lang stiffened, though he tried to maintain a tough expression, assuming it was just another routine inspection. Torres swallowed hard, unable to hide the worry flickering in his eyes. From the first vehicle, Commander David Holt stepped out. His Navy working uniform was immaculate, every crease sharp and exact. But what made everyone fall silent was the gold trident on his chest, the emblem carried not only by warriors, but by the names of those who never came home. Holt didn't look at Lang. He didn't look at Torres. He didn't even look at the stunned crowd. He looked only at one person, Ava Brooks. His gaze locked onto her steady and unblinking, as if making sure she knew there was no one else he had come for but her. Holt walked straight to Ava and stopped 2 steps away. The air thickened around them. People expected him to shout, to interrogate, to issue a reprimand for a woman they had so casually labeled a fraud. But Holt did something no one expected. He stood tall, lifted his hand to his brow, and rendered her a salute crisp, complete, and filled with respect. The kind of salute reserved only for those considered elders in the uniformed community. "Master Chief Brooks, welcome back." The last words rang so clearly that Lang, standing behind him, felt as if someone had yanked him to the ground by the collar. Torres took a full step back, jaw hanging open, with no sound coming out. A few sailors in the crowd instinctively straightened, dropping their hands to their sides. Ava looked at Holt in silence. No smile, no prideful expression. Just the composure of a woman familiar with walking through loss, without letting it reshape her face. But in her eyes, there was the faintest softness, not for herself, but for the kindness Holt had just shown. Holt held the salute a moment longer. When he lowered his hand, his voice dropped into a solemn tone. "Master Chief, I apologize for what happened at the gate. We'll handle this immediately." Lang nearly lost his balance. He stammered, "Commander, I didn't know." I thought Holt turned his head, and his eyes went cold in an instant. "Petty Officer Lang," he said, pronouncing the rank precisely, though his voice made Lang feel like a child being scolded by a strict teacher. "Do you have any idea who you were speaking to?" Lang couldn't answer. Torres stood frozen. The radio slipped from his hand and hit the pavement with a dry clatter. Holt turned back toward Ava. "She served this country for 24.5 years. She disarmed more than 200 IEDs. She's been into places many of you will never set foot in. And you called her a fake vet." No one spoke. Silence covered the entire gate, not a respectful silence, but one of shock, shame, and a weight so heavy it could be felt in every breath. Holt looked at Ava again, gentler this time. "Master Chief, are you all right?" Ava nodded. "I'm fine, Commander." A simple sentence, yet carrying the strength of a lifetime of endurance and rising back to her feet. Lang stared down at his boots. Torres glanced around, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The crowd parted to give space to Ava and Holt, as though everything until this moment had been misguided, and the scene was finally falling back into the order it should have had from the beginning. Holt drew in a deep breath before turning to the Command Master Chief beside him. "Take these 2 to my office. Right now." "Yes, sir." No one objected. No one argued. No one dared look Ava in the eye anymore. Everyone understood that the line they had crossed was not simply one of procedure, it was one of honor. And in that moment, after power had shifted so completely, Holt knew it was time to tell everyone at that gate the truth about the woman standing before them. Commander Holt stood at the center of the base gate, facing dozens of eyes waiting for him to speak. He scanned the crowd once, then stopped on Ava Brooks, the woman who had stood there quietly from beginning to end, offering no excuse, no defense, not even raising her voice once. He drew in a short breath and spoke each word deliberate. "Everyone here needs to know who she is." The entire gate fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Holt's words carried weight, and everyone felt it immediately. Master Chief Ava Brooks served 24 years to enfants in the United States Navy. A few young sailors tightened the straps of their packs. 24 years, the length of an entire career for many service members. Holt continued. "She's not an officer. She never held a command stick. But she belongs to a very small group of Blue Shirt Master Chiefs, EOD, a rank where every decision carries the price of human life." He spoke slowly, allowing the truth to settle. She went out with SEAL Team 3 on missions with no way back, and they trusted her more than anyone else. Someone in the crowd shivered. Going out with SEAL Team 3 was not something said lightly. It was the level of trust only a few EOD technicians ever earned. Holt extended a hand slightly, as if holding on to a memory. In Helmand Province, she was the one who crawled forward alone while bullets hit the dirt on both sides. In front of her were 2 IEDs. If either one detonated, no one from the SEAL team behind her would have survived. The crowd remained silent. The air grew heavier. Holt's voice steadied. The first device she disarmed in minutes. No one shielded her. No one could replace her. She kept everyone alive with her own hands. He paused, then looked directly at Ava as if acknowledging the pain etched into her heart. The second device was lying beside the body of her husband. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Brooks, SEAL Team 3, killed in action while leading the team out. A wave of silence washed across the crowd. A few bowed their heads. This was no longer about a tattoo. It was about two people who had lived their lives in honor and the price they paid for it. Holt continued, his voice low but unwavering. Ava saw her husband lying there, and she didn't run. She didn't break. She didn't let grief decide for her. She crawled to that second IED right beside the man she loved and disarmed it. She stayed calm so the team behind her could escape. She did it with nothing but willpower and responsibility. Holt stepped to the side so everyone could see Ava clearly. 243 IEDs. That's how many explosive devices she disarmed in her career. Every success meant someone got to live. Every failure would have left no one standing here to tell the story. A soft, involuntary sob slipped from someone in the crowd. Holt concluded, his voice deep, heavy, and filled with reverence. No one here has the right to mock that tattoo. No one has the right to question her honor. And no one has the right to touch the legacy she carries on her skin. The crowd changed instantly. Faces once curious or dismissive shifted into expressions of solemn respect. Someone swallowed hard. Someone else straightened their posture. Others could no longer look Ava in the eye because shame had risen too high in their chests. Lang, the one who had called her a fake vet, stood a few meters away, pale as chalk. His hands trembled. He glanced at Ava, then quickly looked down at the ground, unable to bear the weight of the truth now exposed. Torres said nothing. His throat tightened at the mention of Ethan Brooks. There were no words he could offer that would matter now. Ava heard it all without changing her expression. No prideful smile. No triumphant glare. Only the calm of someone who had endured too much loss to be moved by small emotions. And as Holt's final words lingered in the air, something else was approaching. Something Ava never expected, something that would make her the one to deliver the final lesson to the men who had insulted her. After the incident at the gate, Petty Officer Lang was reassigned from guard duty, a punishment far lighter than what he had caused, but enough to remind him that honor was not something to joke about. He was placed on temporary logistics work, inventorying supplies, cleaning training areas, doing tasks that demanded humility tasks he had never imagined himself doing. Commander Holt's words from that day stayed with him every morning, every time he scribbled item numbers, every quiet minute he spent looking at the trident mounted on the Chow Hall wall. Each time he remembered touching Ava's tattoo, his chest tightened as if someone had laid a heavy stone on it. Then a few weeks later, it happened in the dining hall. Ava Brooks was choosing a pot of hot coffee, standing in a corner like any other service member returning to the base after years away. She wore a simple jacket, hair tied back neatly. No one recognized her, and she didn't need to be recognized. For Ava, silence was where she breathed most easily. Lang entered through the side door carrying a meal tray, head lowered out of habit after his reprimand. He saw Ava for only an instant. His eyes widened. His hand tightened instinctively around the metal tray. He stood frozen for a few seconds to steady his breath. Then he set the tray down on the nearest table and walked slowly toward Ava. Ava, Lang mumbled, then quickly corrected himself. Master Chief Brooks. Ava turned her head. Her eyes were calm, as if she were looking at a stranger who posed no threat at all. But Lang felt the opposite. He stood at attention, hands at his sides, shoulders stiff. Lang swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Master Chief. I'm sorry for everything I said. I didn't know who you were. Ava shook her head gently. You don't need to know who I am. Lang hesitated. His confusion flickered plainly. But I was wrong. I was disrespectful. I said things no one should ever say to someone who served. Ava placed one hand on the counter, leaning slightly toward him. She didn't blame him. She didn't show anger. She didn't lecture him about his mistake. She spoke about something more important. Lang, she said softly, but firmly, the problem isn't that you didn't know who I am. The problem is that you thought you knew who someone was just by looking at them. Lang bowed his head. Her words struck exactly where he had avoided looking. Ava continued, see the sailor. Not your stereotype. Look at the person in front of you. Their duty, their responsibility, their sacrifices. Don't look at the assumptions in your head and decide who they are. Lang drew in a deep breath, his lips trembling slightly. I understand, Master Chief. Ava watched him for a moment longer. The remorse in Lang's eyes wasn't fear of punishment. It was genuine guilt from realizing he had disrespected the very values their entire force existed to protect. She nodded. Understanding isn't enough. Change. Become someone your teammates can trust. Lang clenched his fist gently. I can do that. I promise. Ava smiled a small, quiet smile that carried more meaning than any lecture could. It told him she believed in human redemption, even from those who had hurt her. Lang didn't move. He stood there as if rooted to the floor. Thank you, Master Chief, Ava replied in a low voice. You're part of this force. Be worthy of it. Then she picked up her cup of coffee and walked to another table, leaving Lang standing in the middle of the dining hall with a strange, unfamiliar feeling, something he had never experienced in all his time wearing the uniform. The feeling of being taught a lesson about honor by someone truly great through nothing but her quiet composure. He looked down at his own hands, and for the first time he saw clearly that growth often begins with the hardest fall. And from that moment on, the change taking root in Lang was only the beginning. It was about to ripple through the entire base where honor needed to be placed, back where it truly belonged. The incident at the Coronado Gate did not end with Commander Holt saluting Ava Brooks. It became the spark that forced the entire base to reevaluate itself. Less than a week later, Holt signed a new set of regulations on identity verification procedures and standards for interacting with veterans. In that document, he wrote a single line that made many people pause. Honor isn't in the fabric on your shoulders or the shine of an insignia. It's in how we treat those who shed sweat, blood, and tears to protect this country. Every guard post on the base was retrained from the ground up. The classes didn't just teach how to scan an ID. They emphasized something far more important. Behind every card is a life, a history, a pain, a sacrifice no naked eye can fully see. Lang attended the retraining as well, not as someone being punished, but as someone who needed to relearn how to see the people he served beside. He listened carefully to every lesson, took notes, missed nothing. The shame within him had transformed into a determination never to repeat his mistake. Each evening, when he saw the small trident hanging in the corner of the dining hall, he remembered Ava's words, "See the sailor, not your stereotype." He repeated it to himself like a vow, not to the Navy, but to the person he was becoming. Meanwhile, Ava said very little after the incident. She didn't meet with the commander to demand an apology. She didn't want the story rewritten as praise or glorification. She simply wanted to leave the base quietly, the way she had lived since leaving the battlefield. But before leaving, there was one place she had to visit. It was the memorial on the west side of the beach, the place where the names of those who never returned were carved into stone. She walked slowly along the stone path. Every step felt like brushing against the long memories of her 24 years of service. She stopped before a tall granite slab. Carved deeply into it was the name her heart had never forgotten, Lieutenant M. Daughter Ethan Brooks, SEAL Team 3, KIA 2013. Ava raised her hand and placed it gently on the cold lettering. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but because the memory of that day remained intact. The day she disarmed the second IED beside her husband's body. The day she chose to keep living so she could carry the part of him that remained. The trident tattoo showed beneath her sleeve. The ink had faded with time, but the lines were still sharp. It was not only a symbol of him. It was a promise, one she had kept for years. Ethan's legacy would never be forgotten, not for a single day. Ava stood there for a long time, saying nothing. In that silence lived an entire lifetime of loyalty, service, and devotion that had never wavered. Elsewhere on the base, Lang had just finished his final training session. He stepped out of the classroom, looked up at the sky, and understood that from this day forward, he would never look at a veteran the same way again. Ava, with her quiet strength and kindness, had saved his career. Not by forgiving easily, but by giving him the chance to become a better man. And that transformation was the second legacy Ava left behind, not just for Lang, but for the entire generation of young sailors learning what true honor really means. Ava left the memorial and walked toward the parking lot. On her arm, the trident tattoo shone clearly under the afternoon sun. A symbol of love, of loss, of quiet courage, and of a legacy she would carry for the rest of her life. Veterans. Legacy stories. We remember the quiet heroes. If this story makes you believe that honor and kindness never retire, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to Veterans Legacy Stories so that none of their memories are ever forgotten.